Hey everybody! One thing that has been very common in video games since pretty much the beginning has been movie adaptations. And almost spanning that same length of time has been how bad 90% of them are. I'm not even going to beat around the bush here. Let's just get started with this list. This is my top 10 worst movie-based video games. Number 10. Austin Powers Pinball. Never heard of it? Well, good for you. As one of the last games to come out on the legendary PlayStation releasing in 2002, this game is just as painful as it sounds. While I love the movie franchise, they at least could have done more with this than just pinball. Hell, I would have taken anything but this. Pinball in video games never works, and unfortunately stamping the Austin Powers name on it doesn't help it either. The only thing I might give it is the sound design, but if I'm going to play pinball, I'm going to dump some change into a real machine. Number 9. Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. This is a game that I had high hopes for. With no console game for Dead Man's Chest from Disney Interactive and plenty of time to develop this, and also add in the perfect genre for a video game, and you have a recipe for something good. However, when Disney does video game adaptations, they always manage to add something foul to the recipe, and this happens here. I especially find this disappointing because of the grand scale of the franchise itself and what could have been done with a genre like this. So many great environments that could have been explored and so many different elements of gameplay that could have been added, and it's a repetitive mess. The game just looks awkward too. The graphical design is just off for this particular generation. And while I respect Disney Interactive's attempt to recreate Jack Sparrow's mannerisms, it just comes off as creepy in the game rather than a great recreate. And that's my top 10... Oh wait, I'm only on number 9. Shit. Number 8. The Amazing Spiderman 2. We've entered the PS4 and Xbox One era here, folks, and believe me, it's all downhill from here. Seriously, if you thought the actual movie was half-assed, just take a look at its video game adaptation. The visual style won't pass for PS2 and Xbox era. The story is uneven, with characters getting introduced without any meaning and being tossed away just as quickly. Like a few of the other adaptations out there for other franchises, it tries to tell a different story than that of the movie, so it doesn't give anything away and only includes certain elements from that movie. While that's commendable in a way, the one thing that gets really screwed up here is that the story makes no sense. It barely has a plot, its pacing is off, and the bosses are more like last-minute add-ons with little to no coherency with the story. Good Spider-Man games are really tough to come by, and unfortunately, it's only getting tougher. Number 7. Batman Forever. This is not as much Batman as it is a side-scrolling Mortal Kombat. A good way to describe this game is slow, and yet I feel like I'm still being too generous with it. The visuals and fight moves are ripped straight from Mortal Kombat, but are in side-scrolling mode, which makes the characters far slower than they need to be. The controls are delayed, too. It feels like Batman takes forever to punch. The music is also painfully bland and uneventful, making you want to turn it off during the game. In fact, don't turn on the game. It's not worth it. To add insult to injury is the environments. You would think that with a side-scroller, it would make the environments easier to navigate through, but not with this game. Not with this game at all. The foregrounds get in the way, and getting from the lower to upper level, or vice versa, is a nightmare. Also, up is jump. I just wanted to get that out. But I really can't explain that well, so I'll let James do it.
That's a good reason why the jump button should not be up! Why can't it be one of the fucking buttons? Having the fucking up button jump is fucking fucked up!
Number 6. Tomorrow Never Dies. When you think of a classic James Bond game from this era, you think of GoldenEye for the N64. Tomorrow Never Dies was the follow-up, and because of GoldenEye, this was a highly anticipated game. Tomorrow Never Dies lacks all of the excitement of GoldenEye. We'll get the biggest issue out of the way, and that's changing it to a third-person shooter from the original first-person perspective of GoldenEye. GoldenEye managed very well as a first-person shooter because it made the graphics more spectacular than they actually were. Third-person shooters in this era of gaming were not necessarily common because the consoles had poor draw distance and the flaws of the character models were more noticeable and their movements more stilted. And also switching the adaptation to the PlayStation instead of the N64 is also a tiny issue due to the extreme loading times. Tomorrow Never Dies suffers from these flaws. The game is not nearly as quick-paced, and the missions lack any sort of innovation or creativity. In short, for this generation, stick with GoldenEye. Number 5. Dick Tracy. Ah, yes, I'm back to this game. On paper, Dick Tracy on an NES should be fun, but the game just wasn't there. While the concept of the game was fine, the game's insane difficulty was beyond ridiculous. Between its driving stages, which has you dealing with snipers that you're not given the opportunity to kill if you want to stay alive in this game, and having only one health bar throughout the game that is insanely difficult to replenish. The only thing that Dick Tracy had going for it was its look, which isn't bad by NES standards, but the fact that it's insanely hard to even make it through the first damn case is insulting to any gamer who paid full price for it back then. In short, in making Dick Tracy, Bandai literally felt like being dicks. Number 4. Who Framed Roger Rabbit? I won't lie, I didn't even know this game existed until the Angry Video Game Nerd episode on it. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's one of my favorite movies. Out of all of the movies in the world to adapt into a video game, an NES game nonetheless, you would think that this would be the most fun. But LJN turned a fun and adventurous movie into an action game, which not only defeats the purpose of the movie, but makes the game far more difficult than it needs to be given the movie itself. Now, it can be argued that LJN was left with little option because while they might have had the license to the title and its original characters, it didn't have a license to the other characters due to the strong copyright from Warner Brothers and Disney. But is that a really strong argument for the final product here? Not a chance in hell! The game is unreasonably hard, not just with its driving, but Judge Doom is the villain from hell in this game, taking a lot of trial and error to beat, or in my case, watching James' second review of the game because I couldn't really figure it out for years. If there was ever a game I wish Telltale would make, it's Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It's one of the few older licenses that deserves a good game. Number 3. Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows Part 1 and 2. While none of the Harry Potter games were perfect, they were mostly pretty playable and had their moments of fun. This was the norm of the franchise up until the last 2 games. Since this was to be the last 2 movies of this insanely popular franchise, a franchise that I love, many, including I, expected these games to be very stellar. I think we were giving the developers at EA a little too much credit. However, given the pretty good work on the Order of the Phoenix and the Half-Blood Prince, respectively, it was reasonable to expect something decent. This, however, did not happen. Deathly Hallows Part 1 is like the movie, where it is mostly a game about the main character's journey to find Horcruxes. That's great for the movie, but it does not work for the game as it's nothing but going around nearly lifeless environments and having to kill an endless barrage of Death Eaters. Also, to top it off, with boring side missions that have nothing really eventful in them. Then there's the Deathly Hallows Part 2, which is roughly the same except with a Call of Duty-like vibe with its over-exaggerated spell casting. The game also lacks missions in the first half of the game, with a good chunk of the first half and parts of the second half devoted to protecting Ron or Hermione while they're trying to open a damn door. It also doesn't help that the game is unbelievably and painfully short, and I know I've already used a clip from him, but I have to use another.
I shit you not. Immediately after I turned it on, I beat the game. I'm not joking. If you thought Kane and Lynch was insulting, then wait until you get a load of this. Deathly Hallows Part 2 is exactly 2 hours and 52 minutes long.
2 hours and 52 minutes?
For $49.99? Are you fucking insane?
Number 2. Street Fighter the Movie. This is an interesting one because of the concept alone. It's a movie based on a game that they also turned into a game. It seems silly, but given the reputation of the franchise, many thought, like I did, that this would be really good. A lot of people thought that it was just going to be a straight port of Street Fighter 2, just with the actors from the movie thrown in. Which sounds pretty cool when you think about it. That wasn't the case here. While the concept of the game and the overall design attempt screams Street Fighter 2 Turbo, it's a clunky mess that gets its own ass kicked by constant slowdowns in the frame rate, poor battle voices, animations that are glitching out like crazy, and CPU fighters that recover far faster than they should. It's a shame, too, because this is a Sega Saturn, a console that could easily run Street Fighter 2, and yet is having trouble for some reason running the less interesting recreation of it. This is sad, too, because the arcade adaptation of the movie actually wasn't half bad, which makes this version really tough to swallow. And number 1, E.T. I really shouldn't have to go into details about this game, but unfortunately, for the sake of the video, I have to. E.T. is one of the fine examples, and unfortunately is an example that most gaming studios have not learned a single damn thing from, and that is the example of stop making these adaptations at the last minute. Atari developer Howard Scott Warshaw was only given 5 weeks to develop this shitstorm, and what resulted is a game that drives to unmatched levels of boredom. The gameplay and plot is even too ridiculously simple by Atari standards, with gathering a total of 3 parts for E.T.'s phone to phone home. That's it. These pieces are scattered in pits throughout the game. The entire background of the game looks like a golf course. It looks like Warshaw just stole the background from one of those horrendous Atari golf games and pits that look like sand traps. To make matters worse, as if the movie wasn't guilty enough of horrendous product placement, E.T.'s health bar is recovered by collecting Reese's Pieces. Dear God. E.T.'s health bar is another issue. Even the slightest movement depletes his health bar, which makes no sense. Okay, I'll stop there. Bottom line is that E.T. should have been a good sign for developers to take movie adaptations more seriously, but over 30 years later, we're still seeing movie adaptations that are either half-assed or given no effort whatsoever. They're just meant to make a quick buck off the license. Okay, I better end this before I die of heart failure from all of these games, but I do want to thank all of you all for listening, and I will see you next time.